The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
The massacre in Orlando. Chicagoans mourn and speak out as this city prepares for its annual Gay Pride Parade. What can we learn from Orlando? And the gig economy. Chicago's part-time workers are organizing for more rights and a bigger share of the profits. Who are the winners and losers in the move to contract work? Plus, meet the Chicago artist whose work is found around the world, but his most familiar piece is on the city's south side. Stay with us for this story and much more tonight on In the Loop. Good evening. I'm Chris Bury. The so-called gig economy has spurred a new wave of independent contractors trying to carve out a living. Many are finding work in ride-sharing companies such as Uber and Lyft. Lauren Cohn is here with more.
Chris, ever since Uber and Lyft came to Chicago, the ride-sharing companies have been raking in millions. Meanwhile, thousands of people who are either out of work or just need to make some extra cash on the side have been flocking to this new business model. But some are finding the freedom they enjoy as independent contractors has its drawbacks.
I drive anywhere. If there's a request for it, I take it.
John Smize gave up his corporate job to drive for Uber and Lyft. He says it has changed his life.
I don't go home exhausted anymore. I get to have so much fun with my passengers.
But with that fun comes growing concerns about better wages working for rideshare companies, otherwise known as transportation network companies or TNCs. Smize is part of a new organization called Drive for Chicago, a collection of drivers that want their voices heard.
As individuals, we can complain all we want to the TNCs, to the city of Chicago about their policies, but it's like an ant screaming in a crowded stadium. It makes no difference. Uber
and Lyft drivers' take-home pay can vary depending on how many hours they work. After paying for business-related expenses, Smize says he typically makes as little as $7 an hour, while Uber and Lyft rake in billions.
I fully believe that they deserve to be billion-dollar companies. They have this amazing idea and they've brought it to fruition. But they shouldn't be able to do so off the backs of the drivers.
Drive for Chicago is one of many groups rallying across the country for workers' rights. Under current federal labor laws, drivers are not classified as employees, so they can't form a union. Robert Bruno, professor of labor employment relations at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, says that we can expect to see new models of organized labor tied to this new economy.
These workers have discovered what coal miners discovered in the 1920s, women garment workers discovered in the first decade of the 20th century. You're going to have to collectively organize into something. The law says it can't be a union, but it doesn't mean it can't look like a union, walk like a union, act like a union. It could be all those things, and it appears as if that effort has paid off.
What do we want? 15! When do we want it? Right now!
That effort to organize has been seen here in Illinois in the Fight for 15 movement to increase wages for fast food workers. Drive for Chicago is waging an awareness campaign hoping to eventually see the same results won in other cities. In Seattle, Uber drivers recently earned the right to collectively bargain. In California and Massachusetts, Uber settled class action lawsuits just 2 months ago, filed by rideshare drivers.
It's a good thing because it starts to rebalance power a little bit. It helps to return some of the wealth to the people providing the service.
Drive for Chicago's push to organize drivers joins a continuing movement for workers' rights, a path an interfaith-based Arise Chicago has been on since 1991. Chicago Center Director Adam Cater says his staff has helped thousands of workers successfully negotiate with employers.
After 2008, when the economy went down, we saw an uptick of workers reaching out to us, both who were saying we're facing wage theft, we are afraid of speaking up because we believe we'll lose our jobs. Also workers, though, who want to take a proactive approach and just felt like they needed an organization to back them up.
Cater says most workers don't know they have rights under the law, even if they're not in a union.
We see many workers from industrial laundries, from laundromats, maintenance, janitorial, cleaning services, non-union construction, many restaurant workers.
Drive for Chicago has 200 members, and Schmize is hoping more will join, as they realize collectively they may have a better chance of getting Uber and Lyft owners to increase their take-home pay. The organization also opposes Ninth Ward Alderman Anthony Beal's push for stricter background checks, fingerprints, and chauffeurs' licenses for drivers.
The cab industry, they have to do a thorough background check. They have to be fingerprinted. Their cars have to be inspected. They have to pick up people with disabilities. And right now, they're not doing any of those things. So right now, this is a consumer protection ordinance that I'm trying to pass.
Alderman Beal says he won't bow to company threats from Uber and Lyft that will leave Chicago if there are tighter regulations or even a union-style movement.
They're taking advantage of the people who don't have as much, the people who have the least of these. They're putting this carrot out saying you can make all this money, which is not true. But at the same time, it may help some people make ends meet, and we don't want to take that away from people, but the way they're masking their company is really a disservice.
Mike Reaver, Vice President of Government Relations at the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce, says ride-sharing companies and the taxicab industry can coexist in Chicago, and says Beal's ordinance amounts to over-regulation of companies like Uber and Lyft.
You've very clearly seen that in Austin, Texas, where a ride-sharing company left that market because of over-regulation and not enough thoughtfulness about how you regulate and account for this new industry.
John Schmize says he doesn't want to see Uber and Lyft leave Chicago. It would affect tens of thousands of people who currently count on the independent work to pay bills. What he does want is to have a seat at the table, so as to reach a compromise.
I don't necessarily say we want to unionize. We definitely want to organize. We want to be recognized for what we do. Because if there was no driver, there would be no Uber, there would be no Lyft.
And Chris, now the City Council committee hearing on that ordinance has been moved to tomorrow.
We've seen Uber and Lyft threaten to leave Chicago if they don't get their way, both in terms of this organization effort as well as these restrictions on drivers. They've already, as you mentioned in your story, they've already left Austin, Texas. What about that threat to just pull up and leave?
Well, it's interesting because I asked Alderman Beal that, and he said, we're not going to, bow to threats from anybody, but he said if they were to leave, someone else would move right in and fill the vacuum.
And we've already seen that in Austin, right?
Right, exactly.
And so the City Council is going to take that up this week. Where does Mayor Emanuel stand in all of this?
Well, it's interesting because the mayor, who has traditionally supported ride-sharing companies, and his brother was one of the first investors in Uber, has basically remained silent. But the city did tell us that they support, quote, all the stakeholders in all of this and do care about public safety. So we'll see where it goes.
These folks who want to organize Uber and Lyft drivers, why are they opposed to some basic protections such as fingerprinting?
So this particular one, John Schmize, doesn't necessarily mind the background checks or the fingerprinting. What he didn't like was the chauffeur's license issue. According to them, the information they received is it would be cumbersome, it would be costly. Now, according to Alderman Beal, he amended the ordinance to fast-track it to 1 day and $110. So there's the debate. And when you ask the question of the confusion about maybe fingerprinting and background checks, right now that fingerprinting and background checks, or the background checks rather, just go to the company. What the city wants is fingers and background checks that the public can see, that the city can oversee.
All right, Lauren, thank you very much. We appreciate that. This week, Chicagoans joined people around the world in mourning the victims of last weekend's massacre in Orlando, a hate crime and an act of terror. The country is still reeling from the worst mass shooting in U.S. history. This past weekend, 49 people were killed and dozens others wounded as a gunman opened fire at Pulse, a gay nightclub in Orlando. After a 3-hour standoff, officers shot and killed the shooter, 29-year-old Omar Mateen, an American who proclaimed allegiance to leaders of ISIS. Vigils were held around the world, from London to Toronto to New York to here in Chicago. On Monday, hundreds of people, including Mayor Emanuel and other officials, came to the Center on Holstead in Chicago's Boys Town neighborhood to honor the victims.
I'm just really glad to see all the people here. It's nice.
I want us to unify in peace and to, as many of the speakers talked about today, unify through love and not hate.
Let us together lift our voices, our spirits. Let us shout out so everybody on this planet can hear the awesome power of the human heart to choose love, to choose love. I dare you to choose love.
And joining us to discuss this story and more are journalist and author Jen Weigel, Art Sims, radio host on WVON 1690 AM, and Doug Eibendahl, attorney and former general counsel of the Illinois Republican Party. And welcome, everyone. So we have gay pride events this month with the big parade coming up on the 26th. And Jen, what lessons do you think Chicago can learn from the tragedy in Orlando?
Well, I think it's got everybody on high alert, there's no doubt. But as we've learned in the past with things that are public like this, like the Boston Marathon, you kind of can't stop crazy from showing up, right? So to think that we can do something that's going to prevent any sort of act, I mean, I agree that we should have more law enforcement on hand. That will be helpful. But when you're out in the open and you're public like this, I think that it's almost impossible, and I would like to know what everybody else thinks, but to think that we could prevent something like this when somebody has been planning something like it already, it's an impossibility. So coming from a place of not wanting to live in fear and going forward, right, and wanting to spread the love and connect and communicate, one can hope that that won't happen. But I don't think we can be realistic in thinking that we can prevent something like this from happening.
Art, as we heard earlier, this is an act of terror as well as a hate crime. Is it a transformative movement for the gay community in some way?
Oh, absolutely. Such a sad situation, first of all. And you know, the gay community is all about love and happiness. And to have something like this happen is just absolutely horrific. And then now to hear that the FBI is coming in to assist with this, I think it's good. But then I also look at other neighborhoods in our city that are in trouble and are suffering. And if we are to embrace everyone, then I feel as if we should have protection for not just this, but other events as well, too. But yes, just not a good situation, but I want everybody to celebrate Pride the way it should be celebrated.
Doug, we've had this outpouring of sympathy and support, and as Jen mentioned, security is going to be beefed up. Today, the city has announced that it's going to double the amount of police officers. Can you do something to protect against these acts?
Well, absolutely. I think I know the city of Chicago is going to do as much as it can, and of course we should stay vigilant. But you know what, and you can never guarantee, you can never protect against every, lunatic that's out there, as Jen rightly said. But I think I'm confident in saying that folks can be confident in their safety this weekend at the Pride Parade.
That's actually next weekend, the 26th.
Next weekend. And I'll tell you why. Because, you know why? Because there are going to be a lot of good men and women there with guns. I'm talking about the police. And there'll probably also be some folks there, who are legally carrying concealed carry. And that's a good thing about concealed carry. The bad guys don't know who is prepared to protect themselves. I think a big mistake the left has made is this idea that a gun-free zone is everything is fine. What we've seen is a gun-free zone is actually one of the most dangerous places you can be. Why? Because what it really happens is it becomes a free killing zone for these maniacs and for these terrorists.
Well, the gun issue obviously comes into this conversation right away. But as we look at Washington, one of the more modest proposals being debated right now is this idea that those who are on the terrorist watch list be prevented from buying guns or getting on airplanes. Jen, is that a reasonable approach?
I think it is so absolutely important that anybody that is on this watch list be prevented from carrying a firearm ever. And I would love to know, Doug, as you're talking about bringing guns to a love fest, I would love to know why Republicans are against having that law passed. I just need to know. It's kind of like, to me, not wearing a helmet on a motorcycle when you know it might prevent a head injury. Help me understand what the point is of somebody who is on a terrorist watch list having access to assault weapons?
I think you're generalizing. I don't think that's the case. Actually, I'd be the first one to say that if someone can't fly, they shouldn't have a gun. What I want to know is this lunatic who killed all these innocent people in Orlando. Obama's administration had him in twice to talk to him, and had proof that he had talked about his hate and what he wanted to do, and they let him go both times, and yet he was able, not only was he able to buy a gun, but he was able to actually work for a security firm. That's what I want to know. Don't point the fingers at Republicans here. That's not where the blame is. And you know, it's all well and good.
We can all for 16 hours over whether or not assault weapons should be available to people in the filibuster. You're telling me
we can all sit around and sing Kumbaya and talk about love. That's not protecting anyone.
Let me break in for one moment. Among the few Republicans to favor a ban on assault rifles. In fact, the only Republican in the Senate last time was Senator Mark Kirk. Right. And now we have an Illinois Republican Congressman, Bob Dole, who is saying, look, Republicans have to consider gun control. Art, is this a seminal moment in the gun control debate where even Republicans are looking at things such as assault rifles and be willing to change?
Something has got to be done in this day and age. Every day you turn on the television, it's another murder after another murder. People have guns at their access like you would not believe. People who are on lists that should not have guns. People who are threats to our society. And we just keep going over and over again. Something must be done. I don't care whether it's Democratic or Republican. We must come together to do something to help this nation and stop all of this gun violence.
Let's switch gears just slightly, and that is Senator Kirk was also the first in his party to come out and renounce his support for Donald Trump. And he has said that he did not think that Trump has the judgment to handle the nuclear arsenal, which is a pretty strong statement. Jen, do you think that for Senator Kirk, being allied with Trump in Illinois, a blue state, was just political suicide?
No, I think that it's finally a light bulb went off and that this is probably not the best choice for the party. I think that that's going to start trickling more and more and more as people realize that the statements that are made are actually going to harm our country on a global scale. And that's what I think maybe what Kirk is doing might cause others to be a little bit more bold and say the same.
Is Trump a drag on the ticket here in Illinois for other Republicans such as Kirk and Bob Dole?
These do-nothing politicians, like these failed do-nothing politicians like Mark Kirk and Bob Dole, are a drag on Donald Trump, and that's what I'm worried about. You know, to borrow a famous phrase from Donald Trump, I think voters in November are going to say, Mark Kirk, you're fired. Mark Kirk, Lindsey Graham, Paul Ryan, these are, let's face it, these are small, jealous men.
Doug, hold on one second. The question I asked, though, is whether Trump will be a drag on the ticket. And look at the polls in Illinois. Clinton is far ahead. So won't Trump hurt those Republicans such as Kirk and Dole?
No. Unfortunately, no Republican presidential candidate has won Illinois since 1988. The Republican Party in this state has not been doing its job for a long time. Mark Kirk has been one of the leaders of the party here, but he's usually with the Democrats. That's a big problem. But no, I totally reject the idea that, no, in fact, it is just the opposite. I completely reject that paradigm. I am worried about Kirk and these guys who've been doing nothing, record of failure, so actually giving aid and comfort to the other side on a daily basis. I'm worried about them being a drag on Donald Trump. Mark Kirk's only hope to survive in November was to ally and to glom on to Donald Trump. Now, I think with what he's done, I think his chances in November have gone from slim to none.
Jen, you're shaking your head over there.
I just don't think Doug and I will be hanging out at Thanksgiving. That's all.
No,
I think this whole thing that's so frustrating is again the other side and us versus them, and it's like we have to start communicating. And so maybe you should come over for Thanksgiving, Doug, and we can start a dialogue because this has to happen. And I don't think until a lawmaker's son or loved one gets killed by a weapon, nothing's going to change. I just think that's unfortunate.
This lunatic in Orlando. Look, it does appear that he targeted the gay community. You know, he was also Facebooking and calling 911. He was also talking about what he was really annoyed about was the bombing of ISIS in the Middle East. So there's that. So we don't know his full motivation, but we know that he was a hater. But where would that hate of the gay and lesbian community come from? He wasn't getting it at an NRA meeting. He wasn't getting it at a Donald Trump rally. He was getting it from radical Islam.
We know that it was a combination of factors, and we may never know the full extent of his problem. Let's move to the city desk. 2 weeks ago, this program did an in-depth investigation of lead in the drinking water of Chicago public schools. Since then, more schools have been tested, and now almost 30% of those tests have come back positive for lead. Are we looking at a real crisis here as we look for schools to open in the fall?
We are absolutely looking at a real crisis. Let's look at Flint, Michigan, and then we're talking about the city of Chicago, a city much larger than Flint, and you're telling me 30%. That's very high. It should be none at all. And just to fix part of the situation makes no sense. The pipes need to be taken out. This problem needs to be corrected. We know what lead poisoning does to our young people, and it should not be in the school systems at all. It should not be in people's homes anywhere. And really, somebody needs to be held accountable for why this situation has
Jen,
not been.
Some of the progressive aldermen on the city council are calling for an investigation. They're calling for hearings. Is this absolutely necessary at this point?
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, you can go ahead and go backwards, right? And let's blame somebody from 10 years ago. Or we can move forward and get filters in every school. Regardless, they're not going to replace these pipes fast enough. We can't move fast enough. This is catastrophic.
Yes, it is.
We have kids with cognitive disorders that are inhaling and ingesting lead, which is the biggest problem for anybody with a cognitive issue. So this needs to be addressed immediately, whether the federal government comes in or what it is, I don't know. But some sort of filter system, if they can't replace the pipes. I mean, we see how long it takes for construction on the roads. Are you kidding me? It'll take years. We have to come up with, I mean, that's like putting a Band-Aid on a bomb wound. I don't know how we're going to do it, but something has to happen, and it has to happen immediately.
Doug, we were assured for months by city officials that this wasn't such a big problem. Now these tests are coming back, and as I said, almost 1 in 3 schools. Did CPS downplay the seriousness of this?
No, I mean, obviously, I agree with Jen. I mean, they need to, if they haven't already.
That's good to hear.
No, obviously they need to, and I'm hoping they already have. I mean, it's so obvious. Of course, you got to jump in there right away. Right. Like Jen said, it takes a long time to dig up the pipes and replace those. But absolutely, you got to immediately. I assume they've already started this, putting in filters. It's very simple, and I mean, they should be doing it anyway. It's the right thing to do, but. You can also be sure that the class action lawyers are already mobilizing if they're not already, and that's going to be, talk about expensive for the city. I mean, there are some immunities that municipalities have, but it's very bad, especially coming after everything that we saw in Flint.
Finally, lightning round here, just a few seconds left. Former Governor Quinn is back in the news, proposing a term limit on the Chicago mayor, including Rahm. 10 seconds each. Good idea, bad idea? What do you think? Let's begin with you, Jen.
I think it's a good idea. I just think that Governor Rauner's doing this, though, as we were talking before we started rolling, that it's probably meaning he's going to run for mayor, and maybe that's why this is happening. But I don't think that's such a bad idea.
Art, yes or no?
I think
Term limits?
Excellent idea. Yes, absolutely. Number of years, if you've not done what you need to do, it's time for you to go.
10 seconds.
Well, voters can remove, a politician. That's why we have elections. But I have no problem with letting the voters decide. If anyone can get this on the ballot, it's Pat Quinn. And if it does, I think it passes by a lot.
We are out of time. Thank you so much. Jen Weigel, Art Sims, and Doug Eibendahl. We appreciate it. In this week's Art Chicago segment, we meet a local artist who's known around the world, but his most recent work is on display right here in Chicago.
We begin with the sad breaking news.
A global pop icon.
Well, this is certainly the sort of news that you don't want to believe is true.
Prince took his last breath in his Paisley Park home earlier today.
In April, the world mourned the passing of Prince, the Minnesota musical genius who died of an overdose of painkillers. Word of his death left millions of fans around the world in disbelief. For Chicago artist Ramon "Static" Barnes, it was an opportunity to remember his favorite artist through paint.
I felt that Chicago should have a dedication to Prince that met the global standard of street art. And I felt that I was an artist to do that. The reason why I picked Prince and my relationship to Prince is, for one, I grew up listening to Prince. Prince is my mom and pop's favorite musician.
Less than 24 hours after Prince's death, Barnes settled on a location in Avalon Park in Chicago's South Side. He put his spray paint cans and brushes to work.
I wanted to make him look almost like a saint of music, if you will, or an angel of music. That was the reason why I gave him the halo and the wings right there. This mural took approximately 4 to 5 days. Ironically, on the final day, I wound up finishing this mural during the rain, so I finished the Purple Rain in the rain.
Barnes is no stranger to the Chicago art scene. He received formal training at the American Academy of Art, but he started as an artist on the streets of the Windy City.
The thing that really took a shift in my personal aesthetic was me being involved with the graffiti movement. I was one of those kids, tagging your trains. But I made the transition in making that into a form of art rather than destroying someone's property or creating a situation in which I could have some legal consequence.
And that decision paid off.
These are potential mural layouts. I sit and render up new ideas or concepts for murals.
Barnes has now painted more than 300 murals all around the world.
I worked with the Museum of Public Art in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I worked with the German embassy to do an international project, which I taught high school students from the military base how to do graffiti and how to paint.
But some of Barnes's favorite pieces are right here in his hometown, like this one in Logan Square on Chicago's northwest side.
I'm a resident mural artist for the city of Rosemont. We have projects happening with them right now, which I employ youth from the city of Rosemont to produce murals around the city of Rosemont. As a matter of fact, I even did a mural for Chicago Wolves in an all-state arena that's right off the expressway. I worked with Toyota 2015, in which I painted a 3D ground mural to help sell that car. I actually was painting that mural on Thanksgiving, and I had to meet the deadline of the grand opening of the Garrett's Popcorn around the build-out and construction they had. The first project happened on the west side of the building, which is the Sharon Handcrafted Happiness mural, which is students reading books with the world around them and how it affects the neighborhood around them. This one was participated in with students from Simeon High School and Kenwood High School. So all the images of the young people on here are students from both schools participating in the mural. We wanted this mural to really focus in on the youth culture of the neighborhood and for the youth of the neighborhood to see themselves as being productive people in society.
Barnes is committed to helping young people learn his craft. This native Southsider wants the world to know there is talent coming from the city's often neglected neighborhoods.
There's some intelligent, creative, very ambitious, go-getters from the south side of Chicago, and I'm one of many people that's a part of that. And I represent that way of thinking and that way of life.
And keep your eyes open for 2 new Barnes pieces that will be installed this fall at O'Hare Airport. Well, that wraps up tonight's show. You are now in the loop. To learn more about our program, we invite you to log on to wycc.org and click on In the Loop. Until next time, I'm Chris Bury.